Hello, welcome back to the podcast. This time I'm talking to Roger Barrett. Roger is someone I know through work, and he helps us with sort of plastic moulding and things like that. Or he did do. He retired about 5 years ago now. And yeah, we used to take stuff, we still do, take stuff to the company that he worked for, and they'd get it formed, vacuum formed. So he's had like sort of 40 years experience in vacuum forming. So yeah, we talk about that a lot. And then he's also got interest in cars, and we talk about his family history and stuff, amongst many other things. But yeah, I went over to his place and probably spent sort of 5 to 6 hours at his house, and I think I recorded about 3 hours of material. He was very kind and gave me some lunch and all sorts, and we just had a long old chat really. So I think because of that, I'm going to upload this in 2 parts. So this is the first part. But yeah, if you're ready, let's go.
Well, I suppose I better start from my background.
Yeah.
And my background was, I was an only child of 2 parents, obviously.
Yeah.
Harry and Florence Barrett.
Yeah.
My dad was in the army. He was born in 1914.
Really?
On the 2nd of February.
Wow.
And his birthday present in 1953, the 2nd of February, was me.
Yeah.
Some people have all the luck or not. Depends how you think about it.
His birthday present.
So we had the same birthday.
Yeah.
Sadly, my father didn't get married until he was 30, or he didn't have me until he was 39.
Right.
Because of the war. He'd served in the 8th Army, been all over the place. And I always used to say, well, he got the best job in the army because he delivered the beer, because he was a drayman before the war.
Did he?
And yes, he did.
Drayman, what's that then?
It's the guy who carries the beer barrels. They call them draymen. They were used to be on with horses and carts.
Right.
But he went on to motorised transport. And but before that, when he first started, when he left school, he became a button boy, as they call him, like a bellhop.
What's that?
It's the guy who runs the lift in shops and apartment stores, and he worked for Betty's Cafe. You know Betty's Cafe?
Not really. No.
It's a Yorkshire institution,
yeah.
And they had I don't know if it was a cafe or a manufacturing place in Leeds. I think they did have a cafe in Leeds, but they have them in Harrogate, Northallerton and Ilkley. And there's, I can't think there's any others, but on York. And the one in York, it's full of tourists all the time.
Yeah.
And it's...
Busy place.
Yeah, it's round the block. If it's
never really been into Leeds. So is that where you grew up, in Leeds?
I grew up in Leeds. I was born in Hunslet.
Yeah.
And when I was 3, my parents moved out to a place called Whitkirk, Halton actually, just halfway between Whitkirk and Halton, on Selby Road, which was the main road out of Leeds to the A1 to go north or south, really.
Yeah.
So anyway, my dad always told the story of he got the job and he was doing okay, and then one day somebody came up and said, does anybody know how to drive? My dad said, yeah, me. And this was pre-licence times,
you could just drive.
Driving licence. So his older brother happened to bring his van home from work. He was driving. And he went home and said to his brother, can you teach me to drive? He said, oh yeah, we can do that this evening. And they lived in a back-to-back sort of houses with the road that runs up the back.
Yeah, I know what you mean, yeah.
My dad learnt to drive by driving forward and then reversing down. and driving forward and reversing down. And
No turning then?
No turning. And he said that the first day when he went to pick up the van, they had a little Morris van that he was allowed to use.
Yeah.
And they basically did deliveries round to other, shops and hotels in Leeds. The first time he actually turned the wheel was when he got in that van and drove.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, Betty's must have been doing very well because they moved on to a bigger vehicle. They had a Rolls Royce. Yes.
Really?
A Rolls Royce. In those days, you used to buy a chassis.
Yeah.
And then you could either have a shooting brake on it, an open top, a Lando.
What kind of year are you talking here then?
Oh, it will have been, well, he was born in 14.
Yeah.
So it'll have been, I think, probably about 1933, something like that.
When he was sort of 19, 20?
Yeah, or maybe a little before that. Just before driving licences came in. I think they came in 1934 or something like that.
And they realised people were crashing and killing each other.
Well, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And one of his jobs was to go to Harrogate and take deliveries over to the shop in Harrogate, which is on, I think it's East Parade in Harrogate, I can't remember.
Yeah.
And he actually took this Rolls Royce out, and it was there was a thing on the dashboard. He always said, it said for Empire use only, and it was a lever that pulled and opened the exhaust straight out from the manifold.
Right.
So he said the noise was unbelievable.
Yeah.
This thing took off like a scalded cat.
Yeah.
And there was another button that you could turn over or something, and it ran on paraffin.
Wow.
You started it on petrol, and once it got warmed up, you could switch it over to paraffin.
Because it was easier to warm it up, was it, the paraffin?
No, the petrol was easier to warm it up.
Right, okay.
And it was cheaper. And basically, as soon as you got going, you could switch over to paraffin, but of course there was this huge cloud of steamy gas behind you.
God, it sounds like another world.
Yeah, well, I think it was.
Yeah.
There were no traffic on the roads in those days, You could, the thing would do nearly a ton, I think, and he'd probably got it there on the Harrogate Road because it was a straight road,
Yeah.
What
did your mum do?
My mum was, she started working as basically a secretary. She was a clever woman. She was really good at languages. She was, I'm trying to think what they call the dead language that doctors use.
Latin.
Like
my mum then. She likes Latin.
Yeah, she was a Latin scholar, very much like your mum because she was good at French. Yeah. And I think if she'd have been a boy, she'd have been a doctor.
Yeah.
But sadly for the family, my granddad had an engineering business making copper pipes and stuff to fit for traction engines and railway engines and various other things. In fact, fast forward many years, and when I started going to Gainsborough, I remembered my grandparents talking, or my dad talking about taking my granddad to Gainsborough to see a customer.
Yeah.
So I could only presume it was somebody like Marshall's, or somebody like that.
That's where we used to be, isn't it? Before we were up on the estate.
Big engineering, yes, of course.
Were you dealing with us then when we were there?
Oh yes, I remember the rats and everything.
That's a nice place, wasn't it?
Well, let's put it this way: nothing was overspent on rent, but the place got it going.
Yeah.
A lot of businesses seem to want to have the posh factory with the flagpole these days.
Well, that's one of my questions actually. Like, what do you think about people starting businesses? Like, what would your advice be for someone starting a business?
Oh, well, that's very hard.
Just basic stuff,
I think
first a lot of people get it wrong, don't they?
Well, nobody's a guru. Nobody can tell you exactly how to start a business.
No.
I think the golden rule must always be get your finances right. Either your personal finances or something in place that you know is going to last long enough, and have a buffer zone to start a business. As for factories and buildings, as long as the roof holds together,
Yeah.
and you've not too much messing about with maintenance, anywhere will do. You
Yeah.
know, the garden shed's as good as anywhere.
To start, yeah.
Yeah,
Got to start small, haven't you?
Yeah, that's it. And ordinary organic growth is the best type of growth.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, people who've gone from there's wonderful stories, you read them every week in the paper, of people who, you know, have become billionaires through inventing something, or a telecoms, or, you know, just being Elon Musk, you know.
Something really unique and that no one had thought of, yeah.
Yeah. So, as I say, going back to my granddad, though, so he used to travel down to Gainsborough quite a bit.
Yeah.
We, as a family, I remember going to see them. My other grandfather worked for Fowlers, the traction engine builders, who were sort of the Yorkshire Leeds version of Marshalls or Rushtons or that, you know.
Yeah.
You know.
And big engineering companies.
Yeah, big engineering, main locos and stuff like that. Because you got to remember, Leeds was a two-part city when I grew up. It was either engineering, yeah, it basically was. There was engineering, there was, well, I say two-part, probably three parts. There was engineering in the old industrial site, you know, railway engines and all this lot in the 60s. They were still exporting diesel engines to all over the world for mining and things like that.
Yeah.
And then there was the tailoring, the actual making of clothing.
Suits and things like that.
Yeah, because people you didn't wear jeans.
No.
Jeans were our generation.
People wore suits on the beach, didn't they?
Yeah, well, that's it. Your good suit was your Sunday suit. Your next suit was your Saturday night in the pub or bar or club or whatever suit. Yeah. And then your out suit was your working suit. And when I first started work down in Leeds, down at Water Lane, there were people thronging about in boiler suits. Yeah. And as soon as on a Friday, they'd take the they'd leave the boiler suits on, some of them. If not, they'd take the boiler suits off. And underneath they'd have a shirt and tie, and they'd just put the sports jacket on, which was usually a tweed jacket. Yeah. But if they were lazy or they were late for the bus, it was boiler suit, tweed jacket, bus home, and you know, ready for the weekend. And sadly for us, when we first started work, we finished at 5 o'clock, and next to us was I'm trying to think what they call the company now. Oh, they made printing machines. Can't think. And literally, they came out like a flood. It was a sea of people.
Really? Massive place then?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's it. Crabtrees.
Yeah, it were Crabtrees Vickers.
So that's the place you used to work next to?
Yeah, well, sadly they were in front of us. Right. So if we were a bit late getting out, we didn't have a clocking in machine, and if we could sneak out a couple of minutes earlier, believe me, it'd give you a big advantage.
What did you used to do then? What was your first job?
My first job was a paper delivery person.
Yeah.
I was a paper boy, which I loved. I used to love doing it.
A lot of people who've done that say they loved it.
Yeah. My grandson did it when he lived in England, and I couldn't believe that he could have well, I can now because I've seen what he's done, but he had the ability to get up early, because you've got to get up early.
Yeah. Well, you're getting up at like 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, well, my mum used to come in with the coat flannel if I were a bit late getting up. Yeah. Give me a quick slap across the face. Not slap, wash across the face with the coat flannel. And off I went down on my bike and picked up the papers and delivered them. Yeah. And, I enjoyed it. And my whole life career would have been a paper boy if I could have had it when I was 14 years old. I enjoyed it that much.
Yeah, it's nice.
I
suppose you can't get paid as much, though, can you, for just delivering papers?
Well, to be honest with you, the pay was really good, because if you did the Sundays or especially the Sunday papers, because they were massive in those days. Yeah. It was like a telephone directory.
Well, it was everything, wasn't it, really? Yeah. That's where everyone got their information.
And you could, there were tips when you went and collected the money. You had to go and collect the money. So it was a real good learning curve for somebody who was. I was not very academic at school. I did not like school at all. I still to this day struggle with reading and writing on certain things, more so spelling and writing. But many years later, I discovered I was dyslexic. And it was not heard of in those days.
No.
Just you were a bit thick.
Yeah.
I read since I've read loads of books and autobiographies, and one of the ones that stands out is Jackie Stewart, who was one of my, or still is, one of my all-time heroes.
The driver.
Yeah, the driver. Who,
what did he used to drive? Like,
well, he drove for Matra, but he drove for Tyrrell.
Right.
In fact, I've got
Old teams, aren't they?
I've got the T-shirt.
Literally.
Yes, I bought one the other year.
Been there,
they did a repro
Yeah.
of Tyrrell T-shirts, and I thought I must have one of those.
Yeah.
And
Why did you like him so much?
simply because he was probably one of the best drivers of his era, and I think if Jim Clark had survived, which I didn't, I wasn't into motor racing then, but I was just getting into it as a teenager when Jackie Stewart was about. But Jim Clark was the ultimate driver.
It's so weird that you're talking about that, because I was watching something yesterday about that, when he used to drive the Lotus 25.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he ended up crashing, didn't he, and dying. Didn't he crash into some trees or something?
No, he crashed at Hockenheim in a Formula 2 car.
Formula 2, yeah.
And there was always a mystery what had happened. If the mechanics something had not been fastened properly or wired up. Most cars were drilled, the bolts were drilled and wired to stop them coming loose because of the vibration.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
But they put it down to a tyre blowing. But, it's he got the passion in me through watching basically black and white TV, bits of it. My father was not massively into motor racing. He was a football fan, but we always used to watch the scrambling on a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
There was either scrambling or wrestling, but usually after dinner on a Sunday afternoon there was Arthur Lampkin.
You both like to watch that then?
Yes, it was a joint thing. And my dad obviously taught me how to drive, because he was basically a professional driver. He ended up being my granddad's chauffeur.
Really?
Very smooth driver. Very smooth.
Comfortable.
Yeah, but he taught me the same way he learned. I went to an airfield once, and we had a Morris 1000.
Yeah.
And he says, right, set off down the road, and I managed to get it going with a bit of kangaroo petrol, as you did, because it was a bit cold and you needed to work the choke. I mean, cars now are just so simple.
Yeah.
But you had to sort of adjust the choke, and he taught me how to do that. And I got this Morris 1000 going, which was a brilliant car.
Yeah.
And then he said, right, now we've gone about, and we went probably, I don't know, a quarter of a mile. He said, right, reverse. I said, what do you mean, turn round? He said, no, reverse.
Just go backwards.
And he made me reverse all the way. And I said, why are we doing this? He said, well, I was taught how to drive this way, but it came in very handy in the war, because the army teach you, don't turn round, reverse.
Why is that?
Because if somebody's shooting, you can't be buggering about waiting to turn round.
You've got to
You've
go.
got to get a move on.
You've got to go,
And he was a driver, as I say, in the army. And they came under fire a few times. Once when they were crossing the Rhine, and he said everybody just shot backwards, like there was no messing about.
Get back.
Yeah, there were no reversing lights. They didn't need anything. They just needed, he's reversing. Let's get out of the way. He's going to hit us.
Well, yeah, I suppose so.
And that was it. And it's coming very handy, because if I go down a road now, I reverse back out.
Yeah. Just memories of your dad. Do you always mention your dad when you do it?
No, sometimes.
You think about
it? I do think about it. But my wife says, what are you doing? I said, I'm just reversing out. She said, it's a quarter of a mile.
I'm just doing quarter of a mile backwards, love.
As long as nobody's behind you, it's all right, and you use the mirrors. It came in very handy about 2 years ago. We went down a single track road just round the corner, and I can't remember where we'd been. I think we'd been motor racing, and there'd been quite a lot of bad weather, and a tree had come down over the road.
Yeah.
And the bogs, both sides of the banks were muddy. If I'd have tried to turn round, especially in a modern car with tyres as wide as rolling pins, I wouldn't have never got out. So I just reversed out, and it was.
Let's see you doing it.
Yeah, well,
Sounds
I can
good.
give demonstrations if you wish.
You can't do it. Can you do one of them spins as well? Like go back and sort of call the J turn.
Now that's what's known as having a mini, is that?
Yeah.
I
you used to like your minis, didn't you?
Oh, I love my minis. We had 11 minis in total.
Really?
Yes. Well, Janice and I had minis when we got married.
Yeah.
They were always falling apart, as minis used to do. In fact, when we first got married, Janice did the repairs on the interior in the front room of our house at Garforth.
Really?
Took the door off, and she's doing the paint the door, take it in the front room, put it on some newspaper, and put the trim on, and then hang the door. Because, of course, with minis, the hinges were on the outside, so they were relatively easy to bolt together.
Simple cars, weren't they?
Oh yes, they were. But they were an absolute piece of genius.
Yeah.
To say they were an icon is an understatement. The man was Inagonis himself was another hero, really.
Yeah.
Not necessarily as a massively good design. It's not.
No. Although it is pretty.
It's not a Bugatti or a Alfa Romeo, is it? Or a Pininfarina.
Yeah, but it's kind of. My dad always says that he's more impressed by stuff that's like Pininfarina and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's nice, isn't it? It looks great, but what about the stuff that everyone's going to use?
Yeah, that's it. Well, the clever thing about the Mini, although they never made any money on them, was I don't know if you've ever had one in pieces.
No, I had a friend who had one. Yeah, right. But I've never really seen it in pieces.
If you ever see one at a show or anything, you'll see where at the back of the engine, the bulkhead, there's a hole where the speedo goes through.
Yeah.
And it's a hole all the way through. It has a cover on it, on the engine side.
Right.
And the speedo's set in. And on the boot, there's another hole in the middle of the boot.
Yeah.
And when they were making them, they basically hung them on a telegraph pole, something like it, and they rolled them down so they could paint them. It was such a... Yeah.
So they could paint them without leaving any sort of marks on them and things?
Well, it was just the way that they could move them around the factory. I'm on about the shells, not the wheels.
Yeah,
and
just
engines
the
and that.
the body.
And when they were making the shells, and if you look at some old footage, you'll probably get it on YouTube. There'll be somebody showing you how they made them.
Yeah.
And that was just clever little things like that.
So you had 11 of them?
11, yeah.
Well, so were they all the old shape, or were they sort of... Did you have newer ones as well?
There were estate cars. There was... I started with a 1963 one, which I went with some friends to Brixham in Cornwall, in Devon, and one of my friends said, could he drive it? And sadly, the day before, the handbrake cable snapped. Yeah. Which was a regular occurrence on minis because they used to seize up at the back. Yeah. And I said, well, you'll have to be careful. And he said, okay. And he got to this corner and he didn't get round. So I had to sort of not pull the handbrake. I said, just jump on the brake. And I put my foot, he took his foot and just kept his foot on the brake. And I said, when I say now, I'll take over the brake.
Yeah.
Put my foot on, he stepped back, and then he did the clutch and accelerator.
Yeah. And
we managed to drive off. But sadly, he accelerated too hard and ran it into the side of a pub wall.
Okay, yeah.
So it came with a wing hanging off. Yeah. And I'd always noticed some rusty bits on this wing. And it turned out when we took the wing off, we took the whole front end of it off. And in those days, you could buy a fiberglass Mini Clubman from.
Yeah, you could replace it.
Yeah, which looked more modern and exciting. Yeah. So we put that on, I bought it and put it on. And he paid for it because he said it was his fault, which is fair enough. We came to an agreement. We didn't fall out, we stayed friends for many, many years. Yeah. And a very good friend of mine said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll paint it for you. Yeah. In fact, he was here yesterday, was Steve, and he hand painted it. He was out of work. He'd he'd been a draftsman and he'd started working for a paint spraying cars.
Yeah.
But there was a bit short of work, so he'd got a few days off, and he said, "I'll come and paint it for you," and he brush painted it.
Yeah.
And it looked great. But the first thing I did was I put the bonnet on, and he had like little togs, and I never put a check strap.
Right.
So I built it all up, and I was just in the garden messing about with it, and the wind caught it, and it blew the front end down and smashed both the headlights. So I had to go and buy two new headlights, which were very annoying when you were on, not much money.
Yeah, yeah. You used to enjoy working on them and
oh yeah,
changing them and stuff.
Yeah, I used to love them. But when I was saying about doing handbrake turns and stuff like that, I used to love doing handbrake turns in it. Because you can chuck them about the surface.
Good fun, isn't it?
Chuckable. And there was another friend. We'd moved then, and we lived on if you can imagine not a main road, but a road going through, and then two cul-de-sacs. And I lived 2 bungalows up on the one side, and one of my friends lived right at the bottom on in the the round bit of the cul-de-sac.
Yeah, you could turn around.
Sadly, his father had been on a building site and got hit by a crane, fell on him, and left him in a wheelchair.
Right.
But he was one of the most jovial people you've ever met, was Peter.
Yeah.
And he would always taking the mickey out of us. And the council came and put gravel down, as they do when they resurface the road.
Yeah.
And this gravel sort of migrated all the way down this hill to the bottom, so there was like a big pile of it.
Yeah.
And of course my party trick when we were coming home from the pub or wherever was to race down to the bottom, handbrake it and put it through his 2 gate posts between the 2 gates. And in the process of handbraking it, the gravel went all over on the path, and there were very small walls. They were only about a foot high.
Yeah.
With these walls, they were like semi-open plan buildings.
Yeah.
Quite a modern bungalow.
Yeah.
And it went all over the drive, and sometimes it even hit the windows. There's the chips.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'd done this one Friday night, and I was going to pick Ian up on the Saturday. I think we were going maybe to the pub again for Saturday dinner time.
Yeah.
And I pulled up, and he come out down and did his dad in wheelchair.
Yeah.
Oi, you! Do you know what you did to my garden last night?
Yeah.
And I said, what, Peter? Don't you be doing them bloody handbrake turns. I've had enough.
Yeah,
so I got a right rousting about it.
Got a rollicking off it.
Yeah. But I used to do that a lot.
You got to do that stuff, haven't you? And you end up. I've done silly stuff as well in my courses when I had them, which were the minis of my day, I suppose.
Oh yes, there were. Yeah, the Corsa was a.
Yeah, you end up doing something eventually and piss someone off, and then you realise, gone too far there, haven't I?
Yeah, that's it. Well, I would always handbraking it. I mean, the back tyres wore out nearly as quick as the front. But I used to go out in the snow when I was younger, because my other passion in life at that stage was rallying. I used to love watching rallying.
Yeah.
It's now it's become so commercialised, but in those days it was a bit like bird watching.
Yeah.
I know that sounds...
Anyone can get involved, sort of thing.
Yeah, anybody could get involved. It needed a bit of understanding. It certainly needs understanding for the terminology. It's a bit like computers these days,
5 left and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, not so much, but just finding places. You need it to know Ordnance Survey. You just used to get coordinates.
Navigating.
And you had to try and navigate best way you could. I mean, the Bible was motoring news in those days.
Yeah.
Every Thursday, you could go to the paper shop, and I used to go on my way to work, and it had sold out. It was that big.
Yeah.
In fact, I've just finished reading a book about Yorkshire rallying in that era that I was bought for my birthday, and it's fascinating. Just how big it was. You forget how big it was. And as I'm reading through, I'm going, oh, I went to that rally. Oh, I went to that rally, and I had no money. We were married and got 2 kids, so rallying was very cheap. You'd get a gang of guys, everybody would chip in for a bit of petrol. There was virtually no entry fees. It wasn't like going to a football match or motor racing as such. And you just
get the car and go there.
Yeah, that's it. Find the start of the stage, see if there was any entrance that you could, usually Forestry Commission or Farmers Land. There'd maybe be marshals saying you can't come on here, so you go to another one. Or if you were allowed to, you'd just go and yomp up through the woods and,
Sounds like a lot of fun.
It was all right, but you got to remember most rallies were run in winter, so you were up against the elements, and a night rally. Well, I often wonder why I ever went, because all you did was get a dose of Sibby headlights. You were like blinking for 5 minutes, and the car had gone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but, couldn't see anything happening really.
Well, you could if you stood in the right place, but again, you needed to use your nous and stand. Did you
get to do quite a bit yourself then, or?
No, I did a bit of marshalling. I did a bit of marshalling for motorcycling as well.
Yeah.
A friend of mine did trials.
Yeah.
And I did a couple of what they call Ilkley Grand National, which was a trial over the Ilkley Moors.
Right.
And you just find there'd be a designated spot, maybe a stream or a little rill or a valley, a small indent, and they had to go through that without putting the feet down.
Right.
And you'd have 1 foot was a touch. Both feet was not a fail, but I can't remember what they're called.
Disqualifications?
No, they weren't disqualification, but it all added up to a list of numbers that were given in at the end.
Yeah.
The only bit of rallying I really did was I did a little bit with my Mini on a couple of road rallies, which were basically just navigation tests.
Yeah.
And then I did, when I say I did a bit, it was more like an auto, what you might call treasure hunt.
Yeah.
And then one day, a rally had finished and my dad had a Simca.
Right, yeah.
1100 Simca, which was a fantastic little car.
My dad talking about them before, yeah.
Yeah. It was a rear-engined 4-cylinder car, and it used to have so much traction at the back end, and I went flying through just one stage. It was closed, or it finished. I just went flying through, and somebody come up and said, "Bloody hell, you're nearly as quick as rally cars." The only trouble was if you revved it too high, this Simca, it threw the fan belt off, and the whole thing came to an abrupt halt. And if you were really unlucky, it used to take a little wire off the condenser. So I always used to have a little spare condenser. But my dad never knew any of this,
No.
It was taken and washed, and hey, I did this again, but
Would you like to have done more of that then when you were younger? Or?
I don't know, because it was never financially an option for me. I'd started
to get into it properly.
Yeah, and it was ridiculously expensive then. All the top flight people were. I don't know if you know JCT 600, the car dealers. You will
see the logo.
Yeah, they're now Ferrari and all that lot.
Yeah.
But Jack Tordoff, because that's what it stands for, he had a garage, and there's another one in Alton near Leeds called Cooper's.
Right.
And Phil Cooper was a rally driver again, on the back of the business.
Yeah.
So you're either had to be a really good mechanic, or do a lot of work on cars, and I just didn't have that facility. I was more concentrating on working as I went to the plastics industry.
Yeah, so you were in the plastics industry straight away then, were you really, or you? What was that? You said that first job you had. What was?
Well, the first job, as I say, was being a paper boy.
Yeah.
The second job was non-official. I used to go and help my dad. He worked for a company that built banks. They built actually refurbished banks. A very prestigious firm in Leeds.
Banks? How do you mean? Like, literally where you put your
Bank
money?
of England.
Really?
Yeah. The only thing they didn't do were the doors on the strong rooms.
Yeah.
They used to build the strong rooms.
And then someone else will come and put the door on.
Yeah, that's it. And I used to go down and help out, and I got a little bit of money here and there. But my first real job was working in the plastics industry.
Yeah.
I was totally, we said about people not having ambition now. Well, I didn't have a lot of ambition because I couldn't be a plumber because my maths weren't good enough. I wasn't good enough, in my opinion, at reading. I probably would have been if I'd have put myself to it.
Yeah.
I needed a job that was practical. So in those days, in Leeds, the tailoring industry was big. And it's hard to believe how big it was.
Yeah.
You got Burton's, Alexander's, John Collier, and all sorts of other spin-offs.
Clothing stuff.
Yes. Clothing companies all over Leeds.
Yeah.
And they were basically a bit like sweatshops in the fact they were full of women sewing stuff together. But one of the jobs that was classed as a bit better for male employees was being a cutter.
Right.
And I went. My uncle was the deputy head of school careers in Leeds. And the parents had said, look, he's not happy to, he doesn't seem to be wanting to get on with the job. I'd stayed on a little bit longer at school to try and catch up. I haven't said it because it's not really that important, but I lost a lot of time through illness when I was a kid.
Did you?
Yes, I was in hospital for virtually 6 months.
What was that with?
Well,
you can keep it brief if you want.
Basically, I never found out. In those days, people didn't tell your parents exactly what it was. But it was like infantile paralysis. But I didn't get it till I was 7 or 8. And I was quite keen at football and running about. And I'd be just running across the football field and it was like somebody switched my legs off.
Like a plank?
Yeah, just fell straight down.
It was all with your legs, was it?
Yes, it was all with my legs.
Yeah.
And I went into hospital and within 2 weeks I was completely paralysed from the neck down, basically.
Wow.
It must have been a bit of a shock for my parents.
Yeah.
To say the least. And my mother used to come and feed. I was such a fussy eater when I was a kid as well.
Yeah.
And she used to bring me ham sandwiches and what have you, because the hospital were dire in those days. And I was in a children's ward. And I was there for probably 2 to 3 months in this state of not knowing what the hell was happening.
Wow.
It just one of those things. And I gradually started getting better.
Yeah.
They operated on my back twice for a lumbar puncture, which was not pleasant at all.
No.
And then basically I started getting better. I did physio and stuff like that. But I suffered badly with psoriasis.
Yeah.
As a
That's
kid.
the skin
Yeah,
thing, isn't
skin thing, yeah.
Yeah.
And it flared up. So it was that bad. I had it all over my legs, everywhere.
Yeah, my girlfriend's dad's got similar problems.
Well, I do sympathise. I really do. And it went all over. And when I was at school, when I was at secondary school, was when I was at infant school, I lost all this time, which was really at the cusp of when you needed, Yeah. So I was always playing catch-up. Plus, as I say, I believe I was dyslexic. Dyslexia, though, in my opinion, is a gift.
Yeah.
Because
why is that?
Your brain works in a different way. And you can see things quicker, certain things quicker, and resolve problems quicker.
Do you think you're more of a visual kind of person, maybe, or like practical, as you said?
You look at it they say your first decision is your best decision. Well,
Instinctive.
Instinctive, and I found that to be the case with me.
Yeah.
I won't say it's a God-given gift. I've no idea what it is.
It's interesting that, because I was thinking about what your thoughts on instinct would be, and like I was thinking, wonder what he thinks between instinct and planning. And I thought you'd be more instinctive as a person. Would you agree with that?
Yes, but I do. But on the other hand, I like planning. I love to plan ahead.
Right into the future, or just sort of near future.
I always believed in a vision of anything. You know, you have it's like this bungalow that we bought. We saw it. I'm lucky in the fact that my wife's got the similar vision.
Yeah.
She might not be in her eyes the same result, but it's very close.
Lovely though.
Yeah, we bought it, and I wanted a project, or we wanted a project.
Yeah.
We'd always wanted to build a house, but never got round to it. So this was the closest thing. I mean, this, where we're sitting here, was an actual conservatory, a conventional conservatory that was quite old.
Yeah.
We took it down and got the plan in, and what I did enjoy about this was being the sort of project manager.
Yeah.
I bought all the materials.
Yeah.
Went down to the builders merchants, got pally with them,
Nice.
discussed. Yeah, and it was a great, you know, I know you've got on your little list, retirement.
Yeah.
Well, that was something that was a second career for me.
Get stuck into it.
Yeah, for 5 years it's been a second career as this.
Yeah, nice.
And we've enjoyed it. We love the results.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. And I was thinking about doing that with mine actually at some point, because I've got a conservatory on my house. We've only had it for about 6 months. But I went to someone else's house actually, one of my dad's friends.
Yeah.
And they'd done the same thing to this. They turned the conservatory into a proper building, you know.
Yeah.
And it's much better, isn't it?
Well, there's a story behind this building.
Yeah.
My daughter was saying, who's just been to Germany, she'd come back, her husband was keen on, and I think they will, I hope they will, build their own house one day.
Yeah.
Because he's keen to do it, she's quite keen to do it, but they've both got busy lives. He's a financial advisor, so at the moment he's
got time.
He's not got the time, and they're building the money up.
Need the money for it, don't you? It's a big investment.
Yeah, that's it. So the building what you might call a nest egg, or you know, a war chest for the future.
Yeah.
And they brought a book back, funnily enough, from a place called Great Paxton, Little Paxton, which is not very far from where John Cattell lives.
Yeah, in where is it?
It's in St Neots.
St Neots,
and it's a self-build estate. And they brought this book and said, "Oh, we got two. We thought you might be interested." So we built the garage at the back, which we had to use the footprint of the garage that was there, because we'd got the previous owners of this house had actually built the foundations, so we were basically tied to that.
Yeah, you couldn't really change it without changing the planning and all.
That's it. Well, we changed bits because it looked pretty old-fashioned in my opinion, and I wanted a big front door so I could put any car in at any angle, or even put an aeroplane if you want.
Or a tank or something.
Yeah, well, not a tank, it's not that big. maybe a fish tank. And we did some modifications on this house. We got rid of the bedroom and got rid of the garage and made it into a part of the house as a bedroom.
Yeah.
So we got our appetites whetted.
Yeah.
And then I was looking through this, and there was this room in that book, very, very similar.
Yeah.
And it just caught my eye, and I said to Janice, "We'll pull that conservatory down." She said, "You're joking?" Honest, because she'd wanted to do it, and I'd been umming and ahhing. And once I'd seen a way of going forward,
all of a sudden you wanted to get on with it, sort of thing.
Well, we couldn't. It were locked down, wasn't it? So
was it during that? Okay.
Yeah, we got we'd got an architect that we'd use for the garage and planning for the bedroom conversion. So I was quite happy to use him again.
Yeah.
A little bit old-fashioned, but a nice guy. Yeah. And he sort of put a few proposals together, then drew us up some plans. We changed them ever so slightly.
Yeah.
And then that was this. But this is actually a copy, in all sense of the words, of that particular thing. I'll show you. Yeah. I've got the book still. Even down to the colour of the scene after it. It's funny how things happen then. So, you
copied it directly.
But we like blues, you probably guess.
Someone's going to have you.
Yeah, well, you couldn't say it was exactly the same, but you think, bloody hell. And then when we built it, everybody said, blimey, where do you get your idea for this? And I showed the book and I go, bloody hell, it's very close, is that? You know?
Never thee mind.
Yeah, and we wanted a house that was more modern.
Yeah, it's lovely, yeah.
You know.
So, yeah, I guess it was when did you first move here then? Was it?
We moved here, it'll be 8 years this August. We'd lived in Sherburn for 25 years.
Right.
And we'd done a lot on that house. It was a house we bought new. We'd built an extension on it.
Yeah.
Double garage. Changed again a garage into a room.
Yeah.
So the house looked different. And the house at Garforth, we lived at Garforth in a what you might call a bog standard wimpy semi.
Yeah.
We built a garage on that.
So you've always improved places that you've moved to.
Yeah, I've always believed that, you know, your house is where you live. You know, and your home is where you love living. A house can be rented, can be anything. That's somewhere you live, but your home is where you put your own stamp on it.
Yeah, you make it your own.
Yeah.
Starting it again.
Yeah.
Is it going? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what were the first things you were doing when you worked in the first plastics companies? Were you working on the machines and stuff?
Well, I did say to you, my uncle was a member of was the deputy careers. So my first interview, we did as you did in those days. They shipped you to another school, and the teachers there pretended that they were possible employees, and you did a quick filling of a questionnaire, and then they interviewed. It was like to get you ready, but a bit like now if somebody wrote their curriculum, I can't think what you call it.
Curriculum.
Or the other thing, you know, you send it to your possible employees.
Recruitment, you mean?
Yeah, like a CV.
CV, that's it.
Sorry,
yeah.
I'm hopeless these days. And
curriculum
so,
vitae or whatever.
Yeah, so you did that, and you sort of got points out of, and I think lowest you could get, mine was. I think 1 was the lowest, and I think it was -3 or something like that. You know?
Yeah.
It hadn't gone very well.
Okay.
So anyway, my uncle said, right, go down. I spoke to my parents. Tell him to go down on so and so day. I remember. I think it was a Thursday. Yeah, it was Wednesday. Wednesday it was. Go down and ask for Mrs. X. In the office, and she'll get you in touch with me or somebody else. Well, I don't think he'd ever intend it to be there. No. So I went and saw this Mrs. X. She said, oh yes, we've got a job lined up for you as a tailor's cutter, which was one of the things I thought would be good. Because in those days, what it was basically was you got a pile of yarn, material.
Yeah.
They stacked it all up, put a template on, and you went round it with a knifed bandsaw.
Yeah.
And that was a job of quite good responsibility and reasonable pay.
Yeah.
You know, you were talking somewhere in the region about £3.50 a week.
Yeah.
You know.
Bloody hell.
I know, exactly. I knew you were going to say that. So anyway.
Yeah.
The place were mobbed. The place was...
Busy place.
Well, it was. It just happened that I either caught it on a bad day or whatever. But there were loads of kids wanted to go for interviews. They must have advertised for a load of stuff.
Yeah.
And in those days, you've got to remember, the job market was a bit like now. You could pick and choose.
Really?
Yeah.
Lots of choice.
There was so much work. that you could actually go and pick and choose.
So what we're talking here, like sort of early 70s?
It was
late
1969.
69,
Yeah. So anyway, I went back. The idea was you went for an interview and then you went back and reported to the careers place, which was quite a long walk through town.
Yeah.
And then as I went in, I can't remember what I had. I must have gone into a coffee bar or something and just had a snack to eat.
Yeah.
And then went back straight after lunch because they used to close for lunch. And this woman was there. Oh, right, something's just come through now. It's for a company in Leeds and it's working in plastics. Would you be interested? Well, in those days, in 1969, plastics was like being a computer programmer.
The future.
15, 20 years ago,
Yeah.
Blimey, Charlie's a computer programmer. So off
exactly,
our totals down to fret and vac form, as it turned out.
Yeah.
Tony, my boss, was there. I went into the offices. I met some people who I got to know very well over the years. And the first person I met was a woman called Helen Mitchell, she treated me. I was 16 and shitting bricks near enough. Excuse my French, but
right.
And she said, "Oh, don't worry, just come upstairs and I'll show," and introduce me. And the interview was done on the shop floor.
Really?
Yeah, there was no paperwork, nothing.
Walking around the machinery and stuff, and
just literally stood talking to Tony and asking me about school and what I wanted to do and had I got any ambitions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And there was another guy called Tony who was Tony one was the managing director, owner. There was two owners. And then Tony 2 just worked on the machine. And as I'm talking to him, I couldn't stop looking at this process.
Really?
Yeah, because vac forming in those days, it was alchemy, really. You put a sheet into a machine.
Yeah.
A cover comes over it, a heater comes over it. There's one underneath as well.
Flat sheet of material.
Heats the plastic up.
Yeah.
And woof, within a second, a couple of minutes, a few seconds, it goes back, the mold comes up, the vacuum hits it, and you've got this shape.
Yeah.
And
Magic.
It's unlike a press where you see the press come down. You've just, for a few seconds, you've got this sheet of white, or in this instance it was white, plastic. And then all of a sudden this thing pops through it. And there's a very famous BBC 2, the headings when the show, this is BBC 2.
Right, yeah.
And there's one of about the mid-70s, 80s of a vacuum formed number 2 coming through a sheet.
Oh, really?
And when they
That's
did
cool.
it, I said, I know how they did that.
Yeah.
I was doing it all day long.
I know that process,
And I was sort of talking to Tony and answering his questions, but looking elsewhere.
You said you remembered the colour of the thing. Do you know what it was that they were forming?
The things.
The thing that you saw?
Yeah, well, I do actually, because what it was the display items for John Collier's.
Right, yeah.
And the reason why they wanted another employee, they only had one, this Tony who was running the machine. And
quite a small place at the time then.
Oh, yes, it had only been going 2 years. It was 1967 when it started, and I went in 69.
Yeah.
And, it was just basically, the tool itself was a piece of hardboard with bits of resin dribbled all over it.
Right. What to achieve?
A random effect.
Right, okay.
And that's all they wanted.
Yeah.
As long as it was just a totally random effect. And there was about 4 tools in this thing. And it made up a shape that was like an arch.
Right.
The sides were flat. There was an archway, a bit like a car mudguard with knobbles on it.
Yeah.
And then 2 little bits at the bottom. And these were going into John Collier's windows. And each one of them had a mannequin in it with a suit
archway over them.
or whatever, and this archway, and it was incredibly big business then.
Display stuff.
Yeah, display. And anyway, so Tony said, well, what do you think? And I said, yes, it looks interesting. He said, what sort of money were you thinking of? I said, well, I don't know. So he said,
he asked you that?
Yeah. He said, would £5 a week be all right?
Yeah.
Well, I thought, blimey, I'm on the way here. Because at 16-year-old, £5 in those days was a lot of money. He says,
£1.50 increase from your previous job as well?
Well, I didn't have that job. I just
you were there
applied for it, yeah.
Okay, all right.
And...
so it was just one day that you saw how busy it was in that place?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
all right. Yeah.
And then I basically... He says, right. He said, do you want to start? Do you want to... Oh, he said to me, that was it. He says, what sort of future are you hoping for? I said, well, I'd like to think I would on, say, 21 quid a week when I was 21.
Yeah.
So he laughed.
Yeah.
And...
were you joking a bit then, or were you sort of...
No, I was very serious, because I'd got an eye on the future.
Right.
I wanted a job that would sustain me.
Do you think your trouble with your back and your paralysis and stuff sort of pushed you on?
I don't think anything really bad happens in life. I think it's how you react to it.
Yeah.
I've had a few things in my life that have been quite upsetting, but what don't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah, you believe that. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't put...
It's hard to put it down to it, but
no,
as a definite reason, but it may have played into it.
It's like the psoriasis. I came to a conclusion many, many years later when I was covered in it, and it used to flare up. And sadly, my daughter has it to a degree, but she had it very bad at one stage when she was in her 20s. But she's got a grip of it as well. And they say it's a nervous disease.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I just made a conscious decision in my mind. I don't have psoriasis.
Don't have it.
I don't have it. And that was it. That was me. And I used to sit in the house scratching my head, and it used to flake all over. It always looked like you had dandruff.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I didn't have it. It was just an annoying scratch. And gradually, it went.
You still haven't got it at all now?
No.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's just... I don't know. You could call it mind over matter, but I don't know. It's just, I thought...
Who knows?
Well, it was dragging me down a bit.
Yeah.
So I thought, because I couldn't go... teacher... I went swimming one day and somebody said, oh, he's got spots all over him. So I couldn't go swimming. Never learnt to swim.
No.
You know.
I think that's probably the similar reason why Gemma's dad doesn't like swimming and stuff. Probably just because the embarrassment of it and people mentioning it and stuff.
Well, that's it. And I mean, the worst part of it is that your teacher, who should have some... mind you, in them days, they didn't have sympathy.
Sorry, the teacher said that?
Yeah, the teacher said that.
I thought you meant another kid.
No,
Jesus.
no. Well, no, the kid said I was spotted. The teacher copped up on it and said, all right, you don't go in.
Really?
And you go and get changed and wait.
Wow.
But the only good news was I had enough money for a wagon wheel and what they call a jubbly, which was like a triangular orange drink. And I loved those when I was a kid. Yeah. So really, I wasn't that bothered. But when I look back, I think, what a brat.
So you said 21 quid a week?
Yeah, and he said, right, you can start tomorrow. Yeah. So I was absolutely flabbergasted. Yeah. Started on a Thursday. Yeah. Got a paid check on a Friday. Went home, shot off back to I had to go and sign back in at the careers office. Told her what was going on. She says, right, I won't send anybody else now if you've got it. Oh, she rang them up and they said, oh yeah, it's been fulfilled. Roger Barrett's taking the job. And I went back into work home and said to my mum, I've got a job. She said, you got a job? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Expecting me to be, I don't know, a tailor's cutter or whatever. Yeah. I said, I'm working in a plastics factory. And my mother were gobsmacked. Yeah. She was never usually...
Really?
She was very quiet with my mum, but she was never really gobsmacked. My dad was delighted that I got a job, but he couldn't understand plastics.
No,
because
it was the computer science, like you said.
Well, it was, because plastics were so limited in those days. You know, you had polystyrene. polystyrene and a bit of PVC.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Not all these different variations nowadays.
Oh no, there's so many. Plastics are now alloys. All types of different types of alloys are plastics.
Yeah.
But anyway, so my mum said, you'll have to get to bed early and all this lot. Don't forget what time's the bus and all that lot. So off I went next morning. Oh, before that, she says, what do you want? So I said, I don't know. Can I have a spam sandwich?
Yeah.
So she said, all right, I'll make you pack up in a spam sandwich. What kind of cake do you want? I said, well, I like Battenberg. So she did have some Battenberg.
It's nice, isn't it?
Well, yes, it is, but my mother were a little bit short on that inspiration.
Right.
I had spam sandwiches 3 times a week and Battenberg 3 times a week for the first 4 years.
Yeah.
She used to make me pack up. But I mean, God bless her.
God bless her. Yeah.
You know, she looked after me. And I went to work next day and they just put me on light duties to start with, tidying up and one thing and another. And gradually, and then within about a fortnight, I was on the machine.
Nice. Enjoyed it?
I didn't. The plastics in those days were very unpredictable.
Yeah.
Because everything was on rolls, you had to pull the plastics off on a guillotine, cut it to a length, through a guillotine. Bear in mind, the guard had been taken off the guillotine.
Okay.
Which is another story. We had somebody lose a finger.
Nice.
Twice. So I was on cutting these sheets out and getting sheets ready. And Tony, the other guy, was on the machine. He was about 3 years older than me, 3 years older. But he was a real whiz kid. He'd gone to college and learned screen printing, but there were no jobs at that time for screen printing, and he'd worked for a company called Stylo as a designer for a couple of years, and then got this job as a fill-in, I think. But he was so cool because he had a mini Moke, a white mini Moke.
What's that, like a special version of that?
It was a mini, like a Jeep.
Right, okay.
And you see them, and they've got like they're so cool now.
Yeah.
In fact, somebody's started making an electric one.
Yeah.
For beaches.
Yeah.
And they had like a little soft top, but most of the time he didn't have a top on it. We used to get soaked. But and we started work at 8 o'clock and had an hour's dinner. So we'd say, "Come on, we'll go up to Roundy Park," and his girlfriend, that he ended up marrying, worked somewhere around that area, and we met her at the pub, and he'd have 3 pints of beer, as you did in them days, and then drive back and work the machine all afternoon. But it was so cool going through Leeds. Everybody, it's
Had
a
a
minute. It was one of the cars to have at the time.
Right.
And he could be an absolute twit at times, could Tony. I won't say any other.
Yeah.
But he was a nice lad, and he treated me right most of the time, and took me under his wing. And gradually I started using the machines, and as I said, it was a bit of a lottery, because what used to happen is they'd come through the extruder, they'd either stretch them, they were, I don't say they were learning, but I think it was down to price. As they pull the plastic through the extruder, they put it onto rolls, and if they stretch it too much, you get what's known as a shrinkage variant in it.
It wants to come back. Sort of
thing. It's memory. So you'd put a sheet in, and the variance in the sizes could be quite big.
Yeah, drastic.
Yeah, not massive in feet and inches, but
it doesn't matter, does it? When it's like it's all very precise.
Maybe only 2 or 3 mils, but they wouldn't go together. So anyway, and then you get the odd one that had a lesion in it, where the material had not been mixed as it went through the extruder, and you'd have like a little blowhole. And if it was a big one, it was like looking at a galaxy. You see these pictures of a galaxy, and in the middle was the clearest bit, and you knew you wouldn't use that because that would blow a hole.
Yeah. So there's a lot of art. It was an art, really.
It's a black art.
Yeah.
Many people have said it's like a black art, and it's true. It's this knowledge that you build up, and you have to float the sheet.
Yeah.
On a morning, the machine's cold, so you have to blow it up more to keep it floating. And as it gets warmer through the day, the ambient air inside it, you end up with a balloon.
Yeah.
And the amount of times...
So you're always adjusting.
You've got to about... Yeah, that's it. There was a control valve. And you get to the middle of the morning, and that was fire time later on in life, where operators, when we were running 5 machines, you'd get one of them and he'd either be running 2 mil and go to... 3 mil and go to 2 and forget to turn the temperature down.
Yeah.
And you'd...
That's it, you buggered it.
Yeah, and it'd go on the heaters and catch fire and give you black acrid smoke.
Nice.
You could fight the fire quite easily because it was a steel box. These machines were very, very durable.
Yeah.
So the fire was inside a steel box, so there was really no chance of it spreading.
No.
And it was only one sheet. But
contained, yeah.
But soon as armed, everybody were out in the yard.
Because of the smoke.
Yeah, the acrid smoke.
Yeah.
In fact, when we moved to the other factory, we used to have like what I can only describe as a Spitfire propeller stuck at the end of the factory, and as soon as we had anything like that,
sling it on.
We hit the button and everybody went out and it just sucked it all out. It was a big, massive fan.
So how long were you there for then? Like how many people? So there was only a few people there when you started?
Well, I was employee number 2 at Fretton.
Really?
Yeah, I was number 2. In fact, it was on my last pay slip, 002. And Tony, the boss, he was a bookmaker.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he'd decided... Fretton came about by the fact that he'd got a friend who was a partner who had a display business. Display was big, as I say, in the 60s. And basically, we were just a display company. We were making all sorts. And I mean all sorts. We did for John Collier, we did for Alexander Taylor's, we did... I learned antiquing. The plastics available then were sort of white, black, odd colours, and PVC, and it was PVC with a chrome with aluminium.
I remember you talking about this before.
Yeah, aluminium finish underneath. And if you wanted bronze, it was orange tinted PVC, and that translates it to like a bronze colour.
Yeah.
If you wanted gold, it was like a yellow tint.
Yeah.
And then silver was just clear.
Yeah.
And we did all sorts. And what we'd do is we'd spray them with aerosol paints, and then rub them off with paraffin.
Yeah.
And then polish them up with the polishing cloth. And we'd take it in turns. Somebody would be moulding. Somebody would be then spraying them and polishing them. Yeah. And then we'd get to the afternoon and we'd stop moulding and all get on rubbing it down. And, you know...
A lot of hands-on involved.
Yeah, there was. My mum couldn't understand why my fingernails were black.
Yeah.
Because I didn't wear gloves and the spray went all over.
Yeah.
And the other thing that a lot of people don't understand about plastics is the static.
Yeah.
The static can be absolutely purgatory at times. You know, I've been past a pile of plastic and it's electrocuted my ear and burnt my ear. You know your hairs that grow off your ear sometimes. I'm walking, and I had my hair quite long anyway then. I'm just walking past a pile of plastic and we'd stacked it all up, some PVC we got from, I think it was either Austria or Italy. Yeah. And of course it had a nice long drive. Yeah. And I just happened to go very close to it and bang.
Really?
Yeah.
Singed your ear off?
Well,
not your ear off.
Mick, who was working with me, said there was a huge flash.
Really?
I don't know how much voltage it is to jump. But I mean, I got really close to it, but there was a flash of maybe about an inch, something like that.
Really?
He said, I thought you were going up in flames.
That was the end of Rog.
No, my bloody head hurt, I'll tell you. and the other thing was you'd be using a pile of PVC, and you touch the machine and you get a jolt then. So you used to...
It's dangerous in all aspects. Then,
no,
really.
It wasn't dangerous. It was just... No. It was shocking.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah, okay.
It was a bit like one of these Van de Graaff generators.
Yeah.
It wasn't a 240 volt shock. It was just enough to give you a little jolt.
Yeah.
And you think, bloody hell,
Make you step back a bit.
Yeah. And then you got used to it. And what we used to do was we'd sometimes either wipe them with a wet cloth to try and get rid of it, or we'd tend to just leave stuff standing as long as we could. But then we learned that your footwear changes. You change your footwear.
Right.
You know, if you've got
rubberized stuff.
Rubberized, you've just got to be careful you don't. And when they started doing machines with computers, some of the manufacturers made you wear a leash on your arm, like a little dog leash.
Like an earth thing.
So it didn't blow the EEPROMs in the computer. Because we bought a machine and we'd only had it about 2 months, and one of the operators just touched the button and it blew the EEPROM.
Yeah. And
we ended up having to wait a week for it to come from Germany. A card had blown. But they got round that later on.
So you ended up managing a few people. You said you basically ended up being a manager, really.
Well, but what happened was with Tony, he went off racing regular.
Yeah.
Fred used to come. I won't say they had a fractious relationship, but Fred had this display company that sort of came to life at about 3:30 on a Thursday. Because what it was, we're basically making stuff for shop fitting. They get the orders late Wednesday, Thursday, and they had to make them over the weekend to be sent down to London or wherever the next week to go for the shop fitters.
Yeah.
So everything was sort of manana until you got to about Thursday, and then it was like somebody had thrown an hand grenade in the place.
Manana, I've never heard that before.
Well, it was like tomorrow, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Everybody was running around like headless chickens and
All of a
working
sudden.
Saturdays and Sundays flat out.
Yeah.
The downside of that was that they didn't tend to not turn up on a Monday because they got pissed on a Friday night. Sorry, I'll say it again. Saturday night.
Yeah.
No.
Sunday night.
Sunday night. You'll have to cut all that bit out. And
as character, Roger.
yeah, come back on a Sunday night.
Yeah.
And of course they were lost for Monday. But then what happened was we started getting other employees. There was a guy called Mick who was a very clever lad who I kept in touch with for many years. He worked for another company that we knew very well. Yeah. He left us. He fell out with Tony because he just, I don't know, I can't remember.
Disagreement of some sort.
Yeah, I mean, Tony, the big boss, was very forceful. He wanted to make the company work. Yeah. And he once said to me, I said, how come I'm getting told off? He says, because you can take a bollocking.
Really?
Mick can't.
Yeah.
You don't sulk.
Yeah.
So I said, well, no. And I didn't, and it's been my mantra. You sulk, you just destroy yourself.
Yeah.
So all my time, if you ask any of people who work with me, they'll say, oh, he'll bollock you, he'll go mad, and then it's forgotten within 5 minutes. Shook hands and let's get on with it.
That's yourself. You do that as well?
Oh, yeah, I always have done. You could have a real steaming row about something that had gone wrong. Somebody had done something absolutely stupid.
Yeah.
And next morning, it was like Jekyll and Hyde. I'd walk in, good morning, everybody, how are you? Because I parked it.
Yeah.
The problem is people don't park things.
Yeah, well, some people can, some people can't.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, my view was we're not about. It's not about falling out. It's about getting the damn job out there.
Yeah. That's what.
And I gradually got this momentum going, and luckily for me, as I say, Tony went racing. So at 16, 17 years old, Fred had come down and said, "Stop that!" But we've been told by Tony. Well, I'm telling you, I'm your boss. And we used to have to take jobs off, start another job, which took time.
Yeah.
Could take 3/4 of an hour to change your frame and get the material and that. Because
cross purposes then, really?
Well, they were very much at cross purposes. Yeah. So next morning, we'd cop it, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
So Mick could go off, but he didn't get the bollockings because he learned how to sulk. So he didn't get them, but there was a guy called Steve and Peter, and they used to be annoyed about it.
Yeah.
And I just took it on the chin. And then Fred were never about, so we had to get back and try and make up time. Luckily, Tony didn't go racing every day, but he used to go most 3 or 4 times a week in high season, night racing.
It's a lot then.
Yeah. And then I gradually started beginning to think, well, hang on a minute, we're completely out of, nobody knows what to do. If a machine broke down, we'd just stand around doing nothing.
No leadership sort of thing.
Yeah, so
you sort of take it upon yourself then?
I did, and it was a great teacher. But my biggest problem was, Steve were 18 and he was 19 and I was 17. So you've tried telling somebody 2 years older than you.
It's tricky,
to get off his ass and do something. It was very hard.
Yeah, you can't really do it, can you?
Well, I did.
They don't want to listen. People.
I did, and I wasn't the flavour of the month.
No.
With the staff, the others. I mean, we used to go out and enjoy ourselves.
Yeah.
I used to go to mix regular and have some good fun. But to me, it was about, if I'm not going to do it, which one of you's going to do it? Let's get on with it.
Yeah.
And it gradually got noticed.
So it kind of happened sort of automatically. There was no sort of definite, like, you're going to do this. It just you just sort of took it on yourself and started doing it. And
my mantra is, again, one of my little things is, make the decision, right or wrong, is not the question. Learn by the mistakes.
Do something. Don't do nothing.
Do something. Make a decision. For God's sake, make a decision. Don't be Boris Johnson twiddling his thumbs and panicking.
Yeah.
And it stood me in great stead. And the big secret is to learn by the mistakes.
Yeah.
100%. I
think
we'll stop a minute.
Go on then, carry on.
Yeah, so as I say, I used to take responsibility, and then we had a bit of a problem in the fact that Fred and Tony sort of getting a bit more acrimonious. So there was always this like atmosphere, but it carried on for quite a while. And we made some very interesting stuff. It wasn't all about display. We made
unique stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, we made the second. In fact, what's the word? Calendar. I don't know if you know it in Lincolnshire. The calendar, the Yorkshire TV sort of local news programme.
Right.
They had just started at Yorkshire TV about that time, and they'd done a set, but they'd wanted something a bit more jazzy.
Modern. Yeah, a bit more modern.
So we made them, and I can only describe them as a mixture between I don't know if you know water wings. Do you know what water wings are? It's like 2 big massive bras.
Right.
Yeah. Full of, and they were. It just looked like a kidney bowl, did this shape.
Right.
And they put them odd ways up on the wall. And they were chrome. They were actually chrome.
Yeah.
Anyway, they were made by using a chrome implant, which we bought. One thing about fretting then, we tried all sorts. We tried a bit of injection moulding.
Yeah.
We used to do foil blocking, especially for the display, which is basically you'd have a raised surface of a moulding, put it onto a little holder or template, and then you'd hit it with a pad of hot rubber, like a neoprene rubber.
I think I know what you mean, yeah.
It pressed, warmed this stuff up, and then it came off, and you'd get either a gold or whatever. And there were loads and loads of different colours.
Yeah.
And we did quite a bit of that work, again, for display.
Lots of different processes then, yeah.
Yeah, it was a big learning curve in it for, it wasn't just about putting a piece of plastic in a machine.
No.
And we then gradually moved on, as I say, there was the antiquing and stuff like that. And then we had a bit of a quiet spell, and I ended up, because there wasn't enough work, I ended up actually going to our sister company, which was Avon Display, who had a branch called Wainwright's. And I ended up being the van delivery driver at Wainwright's for about I can't remember if it was 3 or 6 months,
Yeah.
because we just had enough. Because Mick, he ran the machine, but he didn't drive, so he had to come to work on a bus.
Yeah.
So he couldn't go up to, because they were up Wakefield Road.
Yeah.
So I had a car, so I could go, and I got to know all the joiners and stuff there, and I met friends there as well.
Nice.
But anyway, coming back to working on the shop floor, so we were doing all sorts of interesting stuff, and these chrome molds
Yeah.
were PVC, and then we sprayed them. We washed them actually with a deionising surface,
Yeah.
and then we put basically silver salts on them.
Right.
So when you sprayed them, they look grey. They look like undercoat.
Wow.
And then you washed them again with the silver salts,
Yeah.
and the chrome came out. It was like a magic.
Like
and
a
you'd
piece
end
of
up with
metal.
this. Yeah, you had this big tray that we had to make a big sink. We made a sink out of wood and formica,
Yeah.
and you sprayed all this.
Mhm.
And the gun was like a bit like, it was 2 nozzles, and where they crossed, you had to hit them. It was a bit like, the bouncing bomb where they,
Yeah.
yeah,
The Lancasters and stuff.
yeah, well, where the two met, that's where you hit.
Yeah.
Anyway, we made these, and this is going back to when I was on a scooter then. I had my scooter. I hadn't got a car by then.
Yeah.
So I'll have been about 16, just going on 17. Odd ones went faulty, so I got one of these and I cut it in half, and it fitted under my front of my crash helmet.
Yeah.
Like you see these helmets now that are
Like a full face thing.
yeah, full face, but it was just a round thing. Of course, what had happened a year or so before, man had landed on the moon.
Yeah.
And there's
Yeah.
that picture of John Glenn.
Yeah.
And I used to put this thing under my crash helmet right through Leeds, and everybody, and in those days there were bus queues all over, used to look and point.
Yeah. Like a spaceman.
Yeah, I looked like a spaceman. But what always baffled me was, why would they want it in chrome? Because Yorkshire TV only broadcast at that time in black and white.
Right.
But it wasn't until many years later that I went to Yorkshire TV to see a job,
Yeah.
and they had a picture up of that set, and
Right.
it was in colour,
Ah.
and they must have photographed it in colour.
Right.
And you saw the chrome, and you saw Austin Mitchell was the presenter.
Yeah.
He was there and smiling and what have you.
Hmm.
And because we did quite a bit of work for Yorkshire TV over the years, we made sets.
One-off sort of stuff.
Yeah, they made the small series. There was one called the Flaxton Boys, I believe, and we made. They just looked like a funny shaped bowl, square bowl, and when they were turned on the side and fastened,
Yeah.
they were then painted with brown, and then I don't know if you know wood dragging, when you make stuff look like
No.
wood, and it was to
Oh,
look like,
yeah, I kind of do know what you mean.
it
Yeah.
was to look like oak panelling,
Yeah. That's
Uh,
the interesting thing about what you guys do, and that side of it is that for us, we make like something that we sell to the same customer all the time.
Yeah,
But you guys have got new people coming to you, or maybe the same people coming to you with a new project that's completely different.
oh, every day was different.
I suppose that's kind of like the fun of it and the pain of it.
Very much so. I mean, I couldn't have worked in a refrigerator factory where it's, today we're having a big day, we're moving on to chest freezers for a month, and vac forming the insides of them.
Yeah.
No, I mean, even repetitive work, like, as you said, motorcycle stuff, which has been massive.
You do need it, don't you? You do need that repetitive work as well.
You
don't
do, but even so, the jobs are different because
Yeah.
the bikes are different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're all
they're,
different.
they're all the same shape,
Mhm.
all the same pattern and what have you. But you're swapping them around, and
Yeah.
it's just a different. It's just the
Every one of
there's
them
no
is a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, big jobs. We used to do carpet trays.
Yeah.
We used to make thousands of carpet trays. And what it was, if you went into your local carpet shop, you'd have a book that opened up with
Yeah.
these trays in it. And they were all 8mm thick, because that's the standard thickness for a carpet. But
Yeah.
they'd have a configuration of different trays.
Mm.
and there'd be a feeler tray at the bottom, which was probably about imperial size, 4 inches by 2 inches, and that was a piece of carpet that you could actually feel the quality.
Yeah, get a feel for it.
And
see
then
what it was
all
like.
the rest were little colours. I mean, goodness knows how many carpets were cut up in the process, you know. And we made thousands of these. And we used to ship them in, and then they'd glue them or weld them into these books, and they went all over for Brintons, Axminsters, you name it, the carpet companies.
Wow.
And that was a bit tedious, because although there were rectangular trays, and they had different holes in them, they went on forever, you know. And that was a bit.
Yeah, you got a bit bored doing it.
All in 1.5 mil PVC, so it was quite a quick process. So if you did that for a week, you knew you'd done it. You know, it was hard work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I learnt a lot of lessons along the way. One particular one sticks in my mind. Tony and his son and Tony and his family went away on holiday, and he took his son with him. By this time, his son had started working a bit for us. And the aeroplane must have only just been climbing as the phone rang, and it was one of our newest customers, Dunlop Slazenger at Aubrey in near Wakefield.
Yeah.
And this guy came on, and he was very irate, and Helen had spoken to him, the secretary. She sort of answered the phone and said, I think you might have to go and have a look at this. So by this stage of the game, I'd actually got a company car. I'd moved on a bit and got a company car. It was a bit later on.
Yeah.
And so I said, right, I'll took the phone call and said, I'll come up and see you immediately. He says, you make sure you do. So, or something like that. He was very offhand, was the bloke.
Yeah.
Anyway, luckily for me, I thought enough about it, and I grabbed the 3 samples that we had. And what we were making was a round neck filler for a golf bag.
Right.
So if you imagine a round top bag, then with a load of, basically it looked like a drain, you know, like a little, but big enough to put your clubs in.
Yeah.
They're now made in injection moulding.
Yeah, like separates them and stuff.
But they were one of the first to sort of do it as a separator.
Yeah.
And luckily, we got these samples, and they were signed off. They'd been signed by both Tony and somebody else, and I don't know if it was this guy or what. So I picked them up, threw them in the car, and shot up to Aubrey. And he kept me waiting ages.
Did he?
Oh, yeah, he kept me. He knew I would. It pickled me, sort of thing.
Yeah, he knew.
So anyway, I waited. And he said, "What's your name?" I said, "Roger." He said, "And you're from that farming company?" I said, "Yes, I am, sir." Well, you're going to have to take all this lot back. They're absolutely no good.
Really?
Bear in mind that this is where, when you work on a machine long enough, you know the process. They'd invested, because they pay for the tool in the end, in an aluminium tool. So there was no chance of the tool moving.
Yeah.
The expansion, and we had a bit of a regime with it. It was always put in the oven earlier to get warm, and then we'd start moulding. So the shrinkage on them, and bear in mind it was probably only about 5 inches across, this thing, was, minimal.
Yeah.
And even if we'd have left them on the machine for days and tried to get them off, they'd have been as big as they could be.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if anything, they were going to be smaller, because if we took them off quick, they'd shrink more.
Yeah, because they weren't supported by the shape and that.
That's it, yeah. So anyway, we went up, and sure enough, he passed me one day. Oh, and this foreman came in, the manager stroke foreman, and he was I can only describe him as a guy in a tie and a shirt with a brown overall, smock coat, and a bit snivelly. You know what I mean? A bit weaselly.
Okay, yeah.
The other guy was in a suit, quite smart, and he said, "Well, what do you make of this?" I said, "Well, can I just have a look at one of those bags?" "Yes, help yourself." And luckily, we went through into it was like an old mill, and there were all these bags, and for some reason, they were all red and green were the bags, and a few blue ones. But over in another corner, I'd spotted there was some like a grey and a mauve colour. I don't know if they were what they were, but there were just a few there waiting to be done.
Yeah.
So he said, look, they won't go in. And all these bags, they were churning them out, and all these wouldn't go in. So I took ours, picked it up, put them back to back, and they were identical.
Yeah.
They were identical. So I said, I can't wait. Tried it in. And then it was a eureka moment. If the two mouldings are the same, something's changed.
Something about the bags changed, yeah.
So I just looked around and said, are they the same? Oh yes, they're the same ones. Walked straight over. It went straight in. Put it in the next one. So I knew what they'd done.
Yeah.
They'd made the neck of the bag too small.
Yeah.
So I said, excuse me. I said, but they go straight in here. When did you make those Corollas or whatever the bloke were called?
Yeah.
Oh, they were last batch last week, sir. Well, they go in then.
Yeah.
And you could see his face. He'd gone. This guy went from red because it was a very warm day. It was a bit like today. It was a late spring day.
Yeah.
And I could see this colour going from this guy. And he thought, I know what's happened here, you know. And he was blaming us all the time about this. Well, you've made them wrong. And he was sniping at the back. Well, they're all made wrong, sir. They've been made wrong, you know. And he knew. Anyway, this guy who'd been as prickly as you wanted became Mr. Nice Guy.
Yeah, really.
And I couldn't believe it. And he just said, I do apologise for bringing you up here under false pretences.
Yeah.
I will sort this matter out. Do you know your way out? I said, oh, yes, sir. Shook my hand. Thank you for coming up so quick. And there was like a corridor that was, in those days, used to go over buildings where the trucks and stuff could drive underneath. And I'm walking along this open corridor, but with no sides on it, just a roof and that. Yeah. And the windows were open and I could hear the bollocking going on. And this bloke were effing and blinding at this other bloke. And you could hear him as I went down into the car park to get my car. But that taught me a big lesson.
Yeah.
Know what you've got, know if it's right, and stick by your guns.
Yeah.
And
you can't back down if you know you're right. You have to.
Well, it wasn't a case of backing down. We had to prove that we were right.
Yeah, and it took them coming along and having a look and seeing it in person.
Yeah, that's it. And then once they realised that they'd made the bags all too spot, and God knows they must have been working all night to get them all changed because there were loads of them. They'd only made them probably, I don't know, an eighth of an inch too small, a quarter of a 3 mil too small or something. Maybe not even that. But it was just enough for this not to fit in.
Working relationships, isn't it?
Yeah, well, luckily we got the samples. We kept the samples and had them in a little cupboard and we could use them at any time, which is what I used to do with the extender fenders for many years.
Yeah.
So if there was any arguments, we'd have the original.
Yeah, to see.
But there's another funny thing about that time of working when we're saying about different plastics. Plastics was evolving then. There was all sorts of stuff coming through. There was like new exciting stuff like ABS. You laugh now because everything's made of damn ABS.
Seems a bit old school nowadays.
Yeah, it does. Well, in the first instance, you could only get matte styrene in white and black. And you had to destat it yourself, which involved using the smelly material, which was like a when you blow bubbles as a kid through one of those
soapy
circles.
sort of smell.
Yeah, but it was a really soapy smell, and that got rid of the static, which got rid of the dirt, and it kept them a bit clean. Yeah. But if you left them laying about for a few days, they were black. I mean, anybody who says plastics is a clean industry haven't got a clue what they're talking about.
It's oil, isn't it?
Because it's the static. It's the static it builds. Yeah. When I used to go in the bath at home, there was a scum of plastic round the bath every night.
Really?
Yeah, because when you're sawing stuff and that gets
just little bits.
Yeah, and you used to have to wipe it off. It was like, you know.
Yeah, and it melts and it makes a mess as well, doesn't it, if you're not careful?
Well, the melting didn't matter, but it was just the tiny bits that you pick up. You know, you could never commit a crime because DNA find that there's a bit of plastic in it.
He's got a bit of ABS on him.
Yeah, that's it. So you can never murder anybody.
There's only a few of those blokes around
well,
Leeds.
in those days. Yeah. Anyway, so one day we had a guy turn up, and he was like the mad professor type fella.
Right.
And Tony said, "Oh, I want you to be in on this meeting. It might be interesting." We didn't have meetings. He just said, "Come over here and listen to what this chap has to say." And he said, "I've brought I want to know if you can do some moulding for me." So Tony said, "Yes, yeah, we can. Yeah, we do one-offs, or we'll do, thousands if you want." So he said, "Well, it's a new material, or it's a new material to us."
Yeah.
So Tony said, "What's it called?" He says, "Polypropylene."
Yeah.
So Tony said, "Poly what?"
Yeah.
And we'd never heard of it.
Yeah.
So anyway, he said, "It's in my car now." So we went down, and it was an estate car. Can't remember what model. And he had two tools, and they just looked like the wheel arch of a truck, a smaller version.
Yeah.
And they were identical, except for one had a boss on the top and the other one didn't.
Mm.
And he brought these sheets out of polypropylene.
Yeah.
He'd already rung up and asked what kind of size machine we had, so he knew that. And he said, "Would you have a go at moulding them?" Well, that was a really steep learning curve, because polypropylene's got
Does it shrink a lot?
It shrinks a lot, it expands a lot.
They use it a lot nowadays in injection moulding, don't they?
Yes, they do.
Does it not shrink as much when it's injection moulded? Or?
Well, it's like everything. Shrinkage is down to control.
You've got to build it in, sort of.
Yeah, you've got to build it into everything you make.
Yeah.
But it was something like 8 to 10% shrinkage.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
which is a lot.
It's usually like 1 or 2, is it?
Yeah, that's it for styrenes, ABSs and stuff like that. So anyway, we get these sheets, and we put them in the machine, and it was quite cold weather, and these were aluminium tools.
Yeah.
So we tried to heat them up a bit.
Take some warming.
Oh yeah, it took a lot of warming. So anyway, we tried to do some moulding that particular, I think it was that day or the morning after, and it was a nightmare, because we just didn't understand what was happening. The damn thing expands that much when you heat it up. You were trying to float it on the machine, and you couldn't, because you got the vent hole, and then trying to close the vent hole off quick enough.
Yeah.
So anyway,
faffing about.
And we were getting some mouldings that were moulded in one area where it was hot, and the rest we just couldn't get it to mould. So I don't know what we're going to do, and we had a bit of a chat, Tony, myself and Mick. And Tony said, "We'll put it in the oven and warm it overnight." We'd bought an oven not that long before, and we put the tools in the oven to warm it up.
Yeah.
So Mick and I were told to have a go at moulding it. So we got it all out ready to go next morning. Tony came up, and then we understood a bit more about it.
Yeah.
We'd shut off the vent. We actually put the material as well to get it a bit warmer. But polypropylene it melts at 100 degrees, which is a lot for a plastic. It'll stand boiling water.
Yeah, it's quite kind of...
It's waxy.
Yeah.
So this damn thing were floating about up and down, and we got a big bubble, nearly hit the top heater, managed to get it back out of time. In fact, one of them had a scar where there was like a visor on the heater, and you could flick it up and it'd come down while it were moulding, and it had this scar dragged across top of it.
Yeah.
And there were webs.
Sounds like a bloody ball ache.
It was a ball ache. What they call webs appeared, where you've got too much material.
Webbing in the corners and that.
Well, it webbed across the unit.
Really?
So we took it all out. But the inside of it was very good, because one thing about polypropylene, it actually melts together and bonds to itself very well.
Right.
So what you get is actually an inside that'd have like a little fracture line where the web was, but it wouldn't come apart.
No.
You couldn't get it apart.
It's strong.
Yeah. So he said, "Well, we've had us go. It's been all right." Well, this bloke turns up. He knew who we were. He hadn't told us. Oh no, sorry, he didn't tell us. He just said, "I'll be back." And Tony didn't. I don't think Tony knew. Anyway, he said, "Don't worry, I'll pay on all this lot." And it was Phillips Domestic Products over at Hip Home in Halifax.
Right.
And what we'd moulded was the first two halves of a washing machine drum.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
We didn't know what it was.
Didn't tell you what it was.
Didn't tell us what it was. Top secret job. Then he chirps up, "Well, you've done better than ICI because they've had it 6 months and they couldn't even get a mould in."
So you gave it a good go.
We gave it a good go. We said, apologised about the webbing. He said, "I'm not bothered. It's the outside. We don't need it. We'll just cut it off and weld it or whatever." And they were obviously going to weld them together. How they went on with that, I don't know. But the rest is history. Because Phillips did make washing machine drums.
Yeah.
You know, the inner bit, not the actual cage.
Yeah.
But we made a polypropylene.
Yeah.
But this was all made as a vac forming. Because to make a polypropylene or rotary moulding
Right. Okay.
would have been a fortune.
Yeah. A lot cheaper
So
to have a go.
the-
Was it kind of like prototype stage?
Yeah, we did lots of prototype. And for 20 odd years, until Phillips sort of sold that site to White Knight, we made all sorts. We once made a tiny a half-size washing machine for a show.
Yeah.
It was like just flat sheets, moulded.
Yeah.
One was a hole, the two sides were identical, and there were a top.
Yeah.
And they glued it together and put some gubbins in. And we even made a little clear window for it.
Yeah.
And it went to some show somewhere. But we did all sorts from...
Sounds like quite hard stuff to price up. Like,
Well, they were good money because you just sort of threw a figure, and if they didn't like it, they buggered off, and if they did, they buy it. But R&D in those days, there were people all over who got R&D budgets that they had to spend.
Yeah.
And show that they were doing something for the money. You know, what have you developed this year? Well, we've got this new washing machine, and we did all sorts. We made one that always sticks in my mind was, you know, fly mowers.
Yeah.
We made a few fly mowers over the years for a company that did design work.
Yeah.
And they made all their own tools.
Really?
And then they glued them together, and they were painted. And I saw pictures of them afterwards, and they just looked like the ones you buy in the shop.
Yeah.
But they were to show the board that this is what the concept is.
This is the concept. This is how it's going to be.
There was no, none of this
rendering and CAD and things. Yeah.
No, none of
to
that.
actually make one.
Yeah, everything was. And I mean, we did a lot of work for General Motors.
I remember John saying that he used to work on. John Cattell saying he used to work on and he did toy modelling.
Oh yeah.
And he said that they used to make. I think he said they used to make a big one out of wood.
Yeah.
And then they'd photograph that.
Yeah.
And stuff.
He's got a picture of a Rolls Royce. I said, that would have got product, wasn't it? He says, that's the original. I said, what's it made of? He says, wood.
Really?
I said, you're joking. He says, it's bloody wood.
Wow.
I said, you whacked him. He says, it's in it. Well, he don't get angry, don't John? He gets forceful.
He'll just keep telling you.
Yeah, it's bloody wood. Yeah. And it was. And I don't know how many coats of paint. He got more coats of paint than an Aston Martin, and they have 29. And it just looked like glass.
Did you meet John through Pyramid?
Yeah, we got to know John through the meetings. Yeah. And I found straight away he was a kindred spirit, because he doesn't... Although he's a serious guy, he doesn't take life so serious, doesn't John?
No, yeah.
He's a nice guy to be around. He's funny.
Likes to have a laugh.
Oh, he likes to have a laugh. Yeah, likes to have a laugh. He'd be in the meetings. I won't say making fun, but just making quizzical comments about certain aspects of the meeting. Certain areas that would go, hey, up here we go again. Well, not in a Yorkshire accent, but in a Cornish accent.
He got off the bike and she was... Have he ever told you about that one where he says... he said he went to the Isle of Man and there was someone racing around on his Ducati.
All right.
And he said, he was beating everyone, this bloke. And then end of the day, they were sat at the pub having a drink, and this person turned up and got off the bike, took her helmet off. It was a woman, long hair. He said, oh, it was a bird.
It was a woman. She got off the bike and she was. I was like, he just made. I can't do it. But the way he said it, me and my brother were listening to the story. I was just like, he's just so funny. I love the way he tells the story.
Yeah,
he's good at it.
The man's man is John, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was a bird. But I must admit, maybe it was Sabine Schmidt's sister.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
You know Sabine Schmidt.
Is that the one who died quite?
Yeah,
in
sadly,
the
the
last couple of
cancer.
years?
Yeah. If you want to watch a YouTube video that's fun,
Yeah.
she starts at the back of the field in a Porsche 911 and passes everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
She.
remember she did that thing with the van on Top Gear, didn't she? Where
Yeah,
she,
yeah.
they emptied it out.
I love things like that. I love I love any of those. One of my favourites is the Beast of Turin, the Fiat Land Speed record car.
Right.
And it's my latest buzz. I've seen it. I've stood next to it when it was running, and it's a straight exhaust, 4-cylinder, 27-litre engine.
Bloody hell.
It's all I always say is when it starts up, it's a mixture between it's like a trawler engine, a racing car, and a chip pan fire.
Yeah, okay. How fast that's going?
Well, it was the fastest object on the earth in its day.
Yeah.
It was a land speed record car. It was quicker than a train, and it was quicker than an aeroplane. Aeroplanes couldn't catch it on.
That's before planes were like breaking the speed.
Yeah, it was about 1913 or something like that. Might have been earlier than that, thinking about it. But if you ever get the video, the guy drives it from. He lives down somewhere near Bristol, and he drives it to Goodwood.
Yeah.
And he's on the main road. And his pursuit car is a 1903 Mercedes, which I've seen racing as well. No front brakes, obviously.
Yeah.
They've not invented them. And they're touching a ton in places.
Bloody hell.
Because it ticks over, I think, at 200 revs.
Yeah.
And if you do 2,000 or 1,000 revs in it, I can't remember, it's doing 100 miles an hour in top gear.
Yeah.
It's so high geared.
Hello, sorry to stop it there, but I'm just going to cut it here and put it on to the next part. So that'll be uploaded in the next few days, maybe a week, something like that. Roger's got a good memory, I think. I don't know if I'll have a memory like that when I'm that old, but I don't know. Roger's nearly, I think he said he was 70 or nearly 70. So yeah, he's got a good memory for his age, I think. But yeah, stay tuned for the next episode, which I'll put out soon. And thanks very much for listening.